Hey guys, welcome back. We've got Evan back in the studio today. Last time we talked about the Adobe Creative Residency.
Yeah.
How was that?
I applied and I didn't get accepted. Not mad about it at all.
Evan is here today because he wanted to do some prints for a gallery he's doing, and he asked me to help him frame and print and all of that stuff. So we're gonna go over the A to Z from printing to mounting and framing, finishing and all of that. So it's gonna be gallery ready, and maybe we'll see the finished product in the gallery. All right, so we got your 3 images here. Tell me about this project.
So I'm a veteran, and about five and a half years ago, I started thinking about an idea to photograph my grandfather in the VFW post that he was a part of. I wanted to do kind of a personal project of my own. And so I started conceptualizing this idea around heroes, modern day people that just have extraordinary stories. And obviously a lot of people think about veterans. So this year I got access to the Veterans Day Parade for New York City. And so I figured I would build kind of a portable studio setup to walk around the streets so that it'd be easy to photograph people quickly and efficiently with the chaos of a lot of cars, a lot of police.
In the middle of a parade?
In the middle of a parade, yeah.
Okay. So then you captured a bunch of portraits. How did you come up with these 3 that you wanted to print?
Well, this guy was one of the first that I photographed. He just had a presence about him off camera that was really magnetic. And then this guy, he was like the gunny. He was almost an immediate, yes, let's photograph him. But honestly, like, this guy was the reason why I actually picked up the entire group. Really quiet, really like calm presence. But when I approached him specifically, he was immediately smiles, took off his glasses and shook my hand and was like, absolutely, boys, let's do this. And kind of got everyone involved. And so for me, it was a case where these 3 just kind of all lined up together. And
can you tell us a little bit about your setup for the camera nerds, the gear nerds out there?
Yeah, so it was a Profoto B1,
okay.
And then it was just a 28-inch parabolic umbrella, because I wanted something that would really create some directional lighting that I could just feather in. And so most of these guys I was shooting just off to their right shoulder. And then I just had it simply on a monopod. The backdrop is gravity backdrops. I had them paint that up and send it over to me. And then I just basically affixed it to B-flat from B-flat backdrops.
Okay.
Just so that I could compress it down into little 4-foot spots.
Okay. So you were moving around your studio, little mobile studio here.
Yeah, it was a lot more of a shoulder workout than we had anticipated. And so 2 of my assistants that were just carrying all the gear continuously were remarking that this was more of a workout than what I had initially told them about.
Yeah.
But it ended up working out really well.
Okay. But at least the weather held out too.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
In photo school, I had a great teacher. His name is Chris Broughton. He taught us how to print and then frame and cut our own mats. Printing in itself is a lost art, but I still like to do it because it kind of brings back the uniqueness in digital prints. Because digital prints, you could print off 1 million prints and they'll all look exactly the same. But back in the day, in the dark room, I guess you can still do it now, but in the dark room, every negative print or every print that you make is unique because it's all, timed and everything. But I think that being able to frame it yourself, it kind of brings back that artistic piece back into it. All right, before we finalize the digital images, when you're printing, you have to know what size you're going to print. So first, we're going to measure the size of the frame, or more specifically, the size of the mat board that it's going to go into. Oh, that's exactly 30 inches, right? That's exactly 30 by 20 and an eighth. From there, we can make the mock-up in photo. That's the first measurement we need. And from there, we can mock it up in Photoshop. So let's go back into Photoshop. Okay, so now that we've got our mat size, what we're gonna do is go ahead and do a mock-up so that we can figure out how big to print each print. This is a mock-up that we did previously when we were trying to figure out what size frame to get, but now that he finally has the actual frame, we can go ahead and do the actual mock-up. So this is what we're going for, but let's create it from scratch. So let's go ahead and do inches. Let's do 30 by 20, what's an eighth of an inch? 0.125. And then with printing, what I like to do is do it at 300 pixels per inch. And so here we have our mat board. What we're gonna do is go ahead and import the 3 images. Once the images are imported into the layout,
I'm going to start resizing the images so that they look proportional to the mat board. You don't want images that are too small or too big for the frame. Obviously, there's no right or wrong exact sizing here, but remember, this is going to be a physical object hanging on a wall, so there's a balance to everything. For me, I just kind of eyeball it in terms of sizing, and then from there, I crudely use Photoshop to do the layout. I'm sure there's an easier way to do this in InDesign or something, but I'm just so used to working in Photoshop, so that's what I'm working with.
So let me show you here. This is kind of a sample. This is an 8-ply mat. It's very thick. The 4-ply mat's also very common, but I like the 8-ply mat because it shows a thicker bevel here. It just gives it a little richer, more gallery type feel to it. So this light gray is that bevel. The other option is doing a full bleed where the image goes to the edge of the frame or the mat window. But I also like to do a different option where the image goes inside and you can see a thin little border around the image inside the window. So I would typically sign inside. The reason I like to do this is because it's not just about the image itself, but when you inset the image inside the mat window, it's also about the print, the artifact or the physical thing about the print. And then the other thing, there's this thing called Optical Center versus Actual Center. A lot of times when you buy a frame off the shelf at the store, this mat window will be right dead center, top to bottom. And if you were to put an image in there, there's this thing where if it's exactly at the center, top to bottom, visually it looks low. And so there's this thing called optically centering the image where you raise it just a little bit, and there's an actual mathematical formula to calculate that, but after you've done it a while, you can kind of visually just raise it up just a hair. And so with this style of insetting the image into the mat, what you can see that the bottom space is a little bit bigger than the top. So that in itself will raise the image enough to give that optically centered look. And because of that, I can actually cut these windows dead center, top to bottom, because the image itself is raised up. That's a little trick that I like to do. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to measure all of these distances. I'm going to cut out the mat boards to size, and then on the back side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure and draw lines for all these distances so I know where to cut the window on the back side. All right, that took a little bit. I'm a little rusty. I haven't done this in a while. So we've got our guide. I printed this out, got all the measurements, and we're finally ready to print. We're gonna print these on letter-sized papers. I'll show you how I do it. So first of all, we're gonna print on the Epson 3880. It's an older printer, but it's the one I used in school, and it still does great. I know they updated it, but this printer actually does really amazing prints, and so I don't really see the need to upgrade. However, Epson, if you want to send me a printer to try out, totally up for that. First of all, we're going to do Photoshop manages colors. Make sure it's on 3880. Like I talked about earlier, I made custom profiles while I was in school, so luckily I've already done it. Hanamiel Fine Art by Arda, and this is the profile that we're going to use. And then from here, what we're going to do is go to Print Settings, and the paper size, we're going to do US letter, manual rear. You're gonna manually feed it in the back of the printer because it's a thick paper. This paper is so thick you have to do it one by one. Each print, you have to feed it manually. And then the way I print, I do borderless retain size. And basically what that does is, normally printers have the margin where you can't print on the edges of the paper, but I take that into account when I do my mock-ups and everything. When you do borderless retain size, that's basically telling the printer, we're not printing on letter paper, but we're printing a little bit bigger paper so that the margin that the printer can't print on is outside of the actual paper that we're printing on. Borderless retain size. Retain size, otherwise it would actually enlarge the image, and we don't want to do that. And you can see here, it says 8.89 inches by 11.39. It's not 8.5 by 11. And so it just expands what the printer it thinks it's printing on. Once you go there, we're going to go down to printer settings. When I named my custom profiles, I put in the name, the other settings that I need to change this to. So you see in the name it says UPPL. So media type, you're going to go to photo paper, ultra premium photo paper luster. That's the setting that you have to put it on when you print on this specific paper. So we're going to set that. And then it says 1440, so we're going to keep the output resolution at 1440, not 2880. Also, because the paper is thick, we're going to go to advanced media control and then platen gap. That's basically the gap between the paper and the ink nozzles where it shoots out the ink onto the paper. That gap has to be accounted for because of how thick the paper is. You know, this letter paper is really thin, so you know the nozzles have to go closer to the paper, but because the paper is thick, the platen gap has to be a little bit wider. So we're going to set it to wider. After that, that's it. Actually, what I'll do is go ahead and save current preset as FA so that I don't have to mess with that again later. Okay, hit save. Here we're going to print to relative colorimetric, and I could talk about what the difference in settings of those are later in a different video, but we're going to click black point compensation, and that's it. We're ready to print. Actually, before I click print, let's go ahead and feed the printer. Paper. After all that prep for the files, we're going to print on this very nice fine art Bayarda. Berta? I don't know how to pronounce that. My teacher would always say Bayarda, so I'm going with that. All right, so what I did was in school we had to test a bunch of papers, so I chose the Hahnemuhle papers, and I still have my binder from back then. So here I tested a bunch of Hahnemuhle paper, Photorag satin, which is my favorite. Good thing I do have a fine art Berta. I don't know how to pronounce that again. But this is the paper that we have here, and I created a custom profile using the ColorMonkey spectrophotometer, all that stuff. So what you do is you print out this stuff through the software onto the actual paper itself, and then you use the spectrophotometer to read the colors as it was printed, and then from there it adjusts. And then from that, you create these custom profiles to get the most accurate colors so that what you see on the monitor is what you get on the actual paper itself. So here's our test print that we did. We had the color charts, the gradients with each color. You do like color photos, black and white. One of the more important things here was getting the black point and the white point and then seeing how the fall off was, how the contrast and all that was. You might notice that visually, I don't know if it's on camera, but visually, the 0 and the 8 looks the same, right? It looks all black. And it's not until you get to maybe the 17, maybe the 26, you start to notice a difference. And same with the white. Here you can definitely notice a difference between 255 and 246. So you can kind of see how the paper handles the blacks and the whites. And then here's actually a zoomed in version. You can kind of look to see from 11 to 14, is there a difference? And if you don't see the difference, then you can kind of tell that the paper doesn't handle the super deep shadows really well. Anyway, this is I'm glad I did this in school, and we're gonna have this paper. This is the paper we're gonna print on. This paper, it feels very thick. You can see that it's 325 grams per square meter. It feels very nice in the hand. You can tell it is kind of glossy, but it's not too glossy. It's not like the super metallic glossy, but it's got a nice subtle gloss to it, so you can kind of see in the reflection with the light. But to the hand, it doesn't, it doesn't feel sticky like a lot of super glossy paper does. So this is a very nice paper that we'll print on. All right, so that's handy to have. I might go over custom profiles in another video, but for now, let's go ahead and print. What Evan did was he as in you holding the camera.
Me.
He decided to buy a whole roll of paper, even though he's only making 3 prints. So there you go. But the printer we're going to print on is the Epson 3880, and it doesn't take rolled paper, but you can do it as long as you want, as long as it's 17 inches wide. So we're going to cut the paper to size so that we can do the prints. Here's your expensive paper. Okay, so this is 24 inches wide. We're going to cut it down to letter size sheets. Luckily, I have this very nice cutter. It's called a rototrim. It's something I used in school. It's a little easier when you have pre-cut sheets. It's not easy because the print side is on the outside, so it's very... Future reference, rolled paper is not good for flat cutting. I think we can make this work, but it's definitely a lot easier when you have flat cut sheets of paper. So what I'm going to do is cut letter size sheets, and this has a nice convenient measuring already on. Eight and a half by 11. Okay, so here is my trusty Epson 3880, the same printer I used at school. I liked it so much I bought one for myself. Here is our roll paper, thank you Evan, with its nice curves. And so you know how I said it's going to be manual rear? This is normal where you can put a bunch of stacks of paper and print on a bunch. But because of the thickness, we're going to manually feed it individually one by one in the back. The paper is loaded and we're going to click print. And because I was printing on matte paper before, this is a glossy paper, it has to switch over from matte to glossy ink, and that takes a few minutes. But luckily, because it's video, you don't have to wait. Okay, slight change of plans. Roll paper, note to self, is not good for printing on regular non-roll paper printers because when it goes through the feeder, you see how it's curved like this? It curves this way as it prints, and so it's fighting it the whole time. And so I'm spitting on this print now, but you see these lines? Can you see that? Yeah, these lines right here, that's...
Maybe. That. I would just point to that one. Like.
Yeah. Yeah, so those lines, basically that's the paper fighting against the ink jets. So yeah, this isn't gonna work. Change of plans. What we're gonna do is, luckily I have this here. This is Photo Rag by Arta. So it's a similar paper. It's the look is very similar. It's 315. It's a little bit thinner. The surface itself is very similar to the Fine Art by Arta. I'm sure the super nerds will say, no, that's all different. No, it's not the same. But this is similar enough, and Evan is happy with the way it looks on the test. So we're going to use this paper instead. Next time, buy flat paper. This is flat paper. This is what you want to use. And see how easier that is?
Shade, shade, shade.
Check that out. Roto trim, perfect cuts every time. Look how nice and consistent that is.
After that whole debacle with the roll paper, we finally got our prints, and they turned out beautifully. There's just something so satisfying about taking a digital picture one step further and printing it out yourself. Instead of scrolling past an image quickly, to be able to pick it up, feel the paper, inspect it closely, pause and just take it in, yeah, that's something special.
So with the front mat, because you're going to look at it, you're going to be able to see it. You have to make sure there's no like imperfections in it. And you want to find like a clean area. So like right here, there's like a little speck of dust that's not coming out. So you want to kind of steer clear of that. We're going to avoid this area right here. So like this middle area is the clean area, and that's what we're going to use.
Here I'm using the Logan 850 Platinum Edge matte cutter. What a name. But you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money on one. They all get the job done. This particular one has guides and edges to make the job quicker and easier, but admittedly, I don't necessarily use all the helper features built into this model. I painstakingly spend the time to make sure I have perfect 90-degree corners, because the window mount that you're going to cut out is based off the edges. So if the mat board isn't perfectly square or rectangle in this case, then your window is also not going to be perfectly squared. It'll be like a parallelogram. It's not so bad if you have a full bleed print where the print goes all the way to the edges of the window. But the way we're doing this, when you have an inset of 0.2 inches white border around the image, you're going to be able to see the white line inside the window. And so that's why it has to be perfectly 90-degree corners. Those white lines are going to highlight any imperfection. When you buy a cheap frame off the shelf, it usually comes with the window mat that's separate from the backing, and then people tend to just tape the image to the back of the window mat itself. But what we're doing here is a hinge mount, where you sandwich the image between two mat boards. And so we'll need to cut a front and a back here.
Okay, so this is the real test. Two that you cut. Let's see if they... Perfect. So the reason why we have two, we're going to cut the window mat on this top board, and it's a thicker one. It's called 8-ply. It's when you cut it at the angle, it gives a thicker bevel. And so this is an 8-ply mat board. The backing you don't see, so we can use a thinner one. It's half the thickness, and so it's a 4-ply mat board. I have seen pictures framed with 4-ply mat boards windows, and you can notice the thinner bevel, and it just looks cheaper. That's why I like to go with the thicker one. I think I've seen even thicker ones, maybe 12-ply, but that's a little overboard. Next time you go to your local museum or go to a photo gallery, look at the mat cuts. That's what I tend to look at. So now that we finally cut out our mat board, the next step is we're gonna basically cut 3 windows into this top piece so that we can put the 3 images in. And these are all the measurements that I'm gonna use to cut each window. And so normally you would have 1 window for 1 image in a frame, but because somebody likes to be special, just kidding.
Sorry.
No, this is also normal. It's called triptychs, where you have 3 images. These bevels are angled in toward the image, right? So if you just kind of cut willy-nilly without even paying attention, you might end up cutting the wrong way, where the angle goes outward and it just kind of ruins the whole cut. That's why from this edge, I'm going to cut this edge, and this edge. And then from this side, based off of this edge, I'm going to cut this cut, this cut, and this cut. You can't do this cut, this cut, this cut, this cut, this, because you're just going to get the flip-flopping bevels. So that's something to pay attention to. So yeah, next thing I'm going to do is mark up the back of this board so that we can make all these cuts.
This mat cutter is nice because the carrier has 2 blades. On the right side, there's the straight edge for trimming the overall mat board down to size. Then on the left side is the 45-degree angled blade for beveled cuts. The aluminum track it rides on weighs down onto the mat board to keep the board in place while cutting. The back side of the mat board is facing up, and you can see the markings I made based off the cutting guide I printed earlier. Before making a cut, I'm carefully lining up the blade to the pencil marks on each end of the line, so that the mat board is perfectly straight. The blade has to enter a little bit above the crosshairs at the top, and cut a little bit below past the crosshairs at the bottom. This is to make sure that the corners are cut fully and you don't have any hanging board on the front side, or else you'll ruin your bevels. It takes some practice and repetition to get the perfect corner cut, but it's better to overcut than undercut. You want your mat board to lift cleanly off when you pick it up.
Had a little bit of hiccups, but not too bad. There we go. Okay, next step, boning tool. This is not real bone, but you can get ones that are made out of real bone. My teacher, Chris Broughton, taught me that this is one step that a lot of framers forget to do. And this is the last touch, is if you come closer, you might notice the edge is really sharp right here on the front edge, right there. It's kind of sharp because the blade was cutting this direction and it was pushing the paper this way. So what a lot of people don't do is use the boning tool to smooth that paper back over onto itself to flatten it out. And then also with this tool, if you come closer again, you'll notice how there's a little overcut right there and like right there. The blade will come at an angle and cut a little over. And it's better to overcut than undercut because you want this corner piece You want this corner piece to come out cleanly. You don't want that little thing to hang on and rip the front of this mat board. So it's better to overcut than undercut. The perfect cut would be just right, perfectly, but that's a skill to be mastered, which I'm not there yet. But with this boning tool, you can kind of heal the front of the mat board by pushing it back in, and it kind of reduces that. It reduces the cut.
Finally, on to matting the prints.
This is special linen hinging tape, self-adhesive. This is acid-free, all that good stuff, safe for artwork and prints. And this is what we use to tape up and mount the prints. And so this is called a hinge mount. Actually, I don't know what it's called. Don't quote me on it. It's a hinge mat, I believe.
The correct answer will be right here.
And it never is. Everyone always points, but I never see anything. Note to other YouTubers. Check out the links in the description below. And we've got our hinge.
Okay, the mat board is finally done, and we move on to mounting the prints. Since these are 3 individual prints, I have to trim the sides so they don't overlap behind the window mat. After that, I carefully line up the prints and use a weight to prevent them from shifting while I tape it down. I use the same acid-free tape as I did earlier, and tape the back of the print using a reverse T-mount. So the first piece sticks face up onto the back, with a little bit sticking out at the top. And the second piece tapes the tab sticking up onto the back mat board. I do this twice to each print at the top, on the left and right side. This basically allows the print to hang freely. I've heard that prints can expand and contract depending on the temperature, so you want to give it some breathing room and not tape all 4 corners down. Rinse and repeat for the other 2 prints.
Okay, do you want to sign this?
Hashtag gang gang.
I'm doing the hashtag Yang Gang just to mark this historic moment. But yeah, what I do with every mount and mat that I cut, I sign the inside so that one day, I don't know if anybody's going to open it, I sign every one. And then usually it's my photo, so I sign the print, but this isn't mine. So Evan, do you want to sign this?
Next, you're going to prep the frame. Clean up all the sawdust and wood particles, and then clean the glass.
I found that using a paper towel with water and a dry paper towel to just kind of clean up the moisture is really good at cleaning the oils and smudges off of glass. And I've tested this because that's how I clean my laptop screen, my MacBook Pro screen. You know, you get smudges all over that all the time. And I've tried using the alcohol wipes on that, and it's just so hard because like there's always some kind of residue. The oil doesn't fully go away. So I found that just simple water, a wet paper towel followed by a dry, before the moisture dries off by itself, if you just kind of wipe it off, then it does a really good job. So try that on your laptop next time. See how it works.
Time to start putting it all together. Before sealing it all up, you're going to want to take a look to make sure there's no obvious dust sandwiched in between the glass and the front mat or the print. Also, double check to make sure there's no fingerprints on the inside of the glass. Once that's done, I place a final foam core as the backing board. This does a couple things. First, it adds another protective layer to the back mat board. But the other thing is that over time, the mat board can warp with heat or humidity, so this foam core helps to keep the mat boards flush against the glass. And then finally staple it in with a framing point driver. And in case you're wondering which tools I actually use, check out the description down below. Next up is sealing the print. This helps keep the dust out. There's a few different ways to do this. Here I use brown craft tape.
So is this your own personal style? Did Brooks teach you this?
This actually, I I did it a different way before. So this is just kind of sealing off the back so you protect it from any more dust going in. There's already a bunch of dust in there. The way I learned at school was you take butcher block paper, the brown paper, craft paper, and you just kind of seal the entire thing. I've seen that way done mostly, but I saw another frame done once, and I saw it done this way, and I thought it was much cleaner. Usually when you have paper covering the back area, there's this gap, you see, and so it's prone to poking a hole through that paper. So I liked how this was a lot cleaner. This one, you're gonna have just this white in the back, and then it's gonna be, the edge is gonna be the brown tape. So I just like this finish better.
Almost there. Now to wire it up so that you can hang it on the wall.
You typically mount it a third of the way down, about 21 inches, so maybe 7.
You're going to want to screw these D-rings about a third way down from the top. A common thing you might see is a single sawtooth at the top center. But a better way, especially for larger or heavier prints, is to have the weight distributed to the sides. Hanging from the center puts all the weight to the top piece, and over time I've seen frames bowing down. For even larger prints, I've seen the wire distributed to a third point at the bottom of the frame.
Super soft, finger friendly is the way to go.
Why is that?
Gotta be finger friendly, man. It's 2020.
Wiring is fairly simple. Thread the leading end in first, pull it back up and around the tail end, back down through the D-ring to create a bite. Then wrap it around a bunch of times. I tend to count to about 7. Surprisingly, even though there's no hard knots or ties, this is enough to keep the wire from slipping.
This is the final touch. Some felt pads on the corners so you don't mark your wall.
In terms of frame options, you can go off the shelf or custom. Custom can run you like $200 or more. Off the shelf can be hit or miss depending on how much you spend. For materials, there's wood, metal, plastic, but I tend to favor a simple, clean black wood frame. I also like to frame with thicker frames in terms of depth, like 1 1/4 to 1.5 inch deep. It just gives it a high quality museum presence to it. For the glass, you can go with glass or plexi, UV coated or not. The cheapest is usually very thin plexiglass, or even just basic glass. Glass is heavy and it tends to give a green color cast to the print. UV protected plexi can run very expensive. A good middle ground is non-UV protected plexi that's not too thin. Just be mindful not to place it in direct sunlight.
Okay, so there it is, all done. What do you think?
I'm impressed. Man's a gift.
So I haven't done one of these framings in a while, but it was a lot of fun. We had a few hiccups, but it took 2 days to finish it, and we finally got it done. This, in a digital world where we shoot digitally and we just upload to Instagram and Facebook all the time. Who uploads to Facebook anymore? But in a world where we just constantly are in the digital world, it's nice to, I just said world twice. It's nice to bring back the artisan craft into something physical again. So thanks, Evan, for giving me this opportunity for you to have me do this. I'm really looking forward to your gallery show on
Wednesday.
If all goes to plan, this video will be out after Wednesday, so if you're in the New York area, too bad you missed the show. February 12th to the 25th, you could still go check out the gallery. Where is it?
The link will be in the bio, which
it'll be in the description below.
Salgamundi Club.
Salgamundi Club on 5th Avenue. If you're in New York, go check it out. It's a bunch of pictures by veterans. So this guy's a veteran. These guys are all veterans. I think I'm a veteran, but yeah, go check it out. Here it is. Transition.